Okay, so today we're diving into a really tense situation that's brewing in one of the world's most critical waterways, the Strait of Hormuz. A world leader has made a demand, but the response wasn't at all what anyone expected. It's a story about how international alliances can get really strained when domestic pressure starts to build. Let's break it all down. This entire situation really boils down to one huge question, one that kind of tests the whole idea of alliances. What actually happens when a superpower makes a big demand and its closest friends and partners just push back? That's the real tension we're going to unpack here. So, where does this all kick off? Well, it starts with a demand, a very public, very clear demand coming straight from the United States. The first domino to fall was this public call for other countries to chip in for the military defense of this super important shipping lane. And let's be clear, this wasn't really a friendly suggestion. It was basically a demand for allies to share the burden and the risk. Now, to make things even more complicated, you've got the president's own framing of the situation. On one hand, he's suggesting Iran is desperate for a deal, but then he says they're not ready to negotiate. This creates a really confusing picture for allies. I mean, what's the goal here? Is it military containment or is it diplomacy? That demand, though, it did not get the warm welcome you might expect. In fact, the response from some key partners created the first big crack in this whole story. Let's take a look at how those allies pushed back. And this slide really shows you that divide perfectly. On one side, you have the US saying, hey, pitch in. But the response from their partners wasn't just a little hesitation. We're talking deep concern, with some even questioning if what was being asked was even legal. And let's get specific with a really important example. Japan. It is really rare for Japan to break step with the US, which is what makes their reaction so telling. Their government publicly questioned the legality of any potential strikes and showed some major reservations. And this wasn't just quiet behind-the-scenes stuff. Their leader was apparently set to bring these concerns right to the White House. That is a major public disagreement. Now, this pushback from allies isn't happening in a vacuum. It seems like it's being fueled by this growing feeling that the US itself doesn't really have a clear plan, which brings us to the confusing American strategy. The messages coming from the White House have been all over the place. First, the president wants a deal. Okay. Then he says he won't talk. A little later, the administration says talks are on. Meanwhile, Iran is saying no negotiations are happening at all. It's kind of dizzying, right? It just creates this huge cloud of uncertainty. And all this confusion has created what a lot of people see as a strategy vacuum. With no clear endgame coming out of Washington, allies are left guessing what the objective even is. And that kind of uncertainty, it has consequences, not just for diplomacy, but for the financial markets too. So these are the big questions that are echoing not just in other countries, but in Washington itself. What's the plan here? A military solution? A diplomatic one? What does a win even look like? Is there an exit strategy? And what exactly does the US want in a new deal with Iran? Right now, nobody seems to have clear answers. So with this strategic void, where does the administration's focus seem to be? Well, it looks like it's been less on finding long-term solutions and a lot more on managing the immediate economic problem, specifically controlling energy prices. And that really shows you how much domestic concerns are shaping this whole crisis. Because all of this international drama is deeply, deeply connected to what's happening right here at home. So let's look at how that pressure is mounting. There is a very real ticking clock here. Gas prices are going up, and it's happening just as the country is heading into the summer driving season, a time when people are really sensitive to prices at the pump. And of course, hanging over all of it, the November elections. So you've got this domestic squeeze coming from a few different directions. Rising gas prices are hitting people's wallets. Public displeasure with the conflict is growing, and that election clock is just ticking down, making the political stakes of every single decision that much higher. Yeah, public opinion is a huge factor here. Word is that the longer this whole situation goes on without a clear resolution, the more American support for it starts to drop. And that is a dangerous trend when you're this close to an election. This quote really gets right to the heart of it. You just can't separate domestic politics from foreign policy in a situation like this. What happens at the gas pump in America is directly influencing the strategic moves being made in the Strait of Hormuz. So we're left with this final, really interesting question. When domestic pressures get this intense, when that political clock is ticking so loudly, is it even possible for a clear, long-term foreign policy to take shape? Or do the short-term political needs always end up calling the shots? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer.